Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ESPN Cricinfo Power Play. And this is part 2 of our podcast on the Afghanistan women's cricket team. Most of them now based in Australia. We have brought you stories of them coming out of Afghanistan, how they came to be in Australia. And now I guess we're going to bring you a little bit more on what they're doing now. That begins with a match this week. The Afghanistan women's 11 are going to play against Cricket Without Borders 11 in a T20 match at Junction Oval in Melbourne. Now, that's going to happen on the morning that the Women's Ashes Test begins at the MCG later that day. So we brought you their stories of how they came to be here, and now we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening. But this is all going on against a backdrop of the fact that things have gotten worse for women still living in Afghanistan. We've had debate reignited over whether the men's teams around the world should boycott playing matches against the Afghanistan men in the upcoming Champions Trophy. And there's been all sorts of discussion around that, whether boycotts work, whether they don't work. And Firdose, I know you've done some research in terms of Amnesty International and their views on boycotts and bans and that sort of thing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. So I think I just want to start by saying, being a South African, and I didn't live through the sporting boycott. I was alive when South Africa came back into international sport in the 90s, but when they were banned in the 60s, I was but a thought in my parents' mind. But it was an effective boycott, and that was, of course, a ban against race-based apartheid. And it wasn't the only boycott. There was big divestment in South Africa at the time. Business pulled out. There was economic pressure on them. The sporting boycott helped to raise awareness. And I think from my perspective, and when we talk about it here in South Africa, we make such an easy comparison. But we banned South Africa, so why not ban Afghanistan? Because there's talk of it being labeled gender-based apartheid. In fact, the country's sports minister, South Africa's sports minister, Gayton McKenzie, he's come out and used words to that effect. And I guess the question is, will a boycott still work? And Amnesty International, I heard their spokesperson, Felix Jacobs, talking on the BBC's Women's Hour podcast. So I'm an avid listener to Women's Hour, and I don't mind giving it a shout out. And he explained Amnesty International's position as being one that does not support boycotts, not because they don't believe boycotts work, but because they're worried about the general efficacy on ordinary people. What does a boycott do to the poorest of the poor, to the weakest of the weak? This was also an argument used in South Africa. However, what I found really interesting about the interview on Women's Hour was that Amnesty International is not against other people boycotting Afghanistan. They're very concerned, as we all are, with the situation around women's and girls' rights. And they think that if other organizations feel that a boycott will be effective, and that other organization could be, for example, Cricket Australia, Cricket South Africa, the ICC, those types of organizations, they would support them boycotting Afghanistan. None of them have really done that. Even Cricket Australia, who don't play Afghanistan in bilateral series, we know that they do play them in global events. I have a theory around this. And one of my theories is that when South Africa was banned in the 60s, there were no World Cups to start off with. So the commercial rights that come with the World Cup didn't exist. The broadcast rights didn't exist. And the world was really a different place. We were coming from a time, it was still in the middle of the Cold War, and there was this ideological debate going on in the world around the kind of powers that be. We've kind of passed all of that. We're in late stage capitalism now, and I think the world is a very different place. So I'm not sure that a boycott would be effective, and I don't know if it would just make life more miserable for women and girls in Afghanistan. I do know that as somebody from South Africa, having known about our own sporting boycott and seen the effect that that had, it doesn't sound like an outlandish thing. It sounds like a conversation we could have. Folks, you're on the outside of this. I mean, you've heard me talk about South Africa and apartheid for a long time. How do you feel about a ban? And we've spoken to the women involved as well. How do you think they feel?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we'll hear some more of their thoughts on this. And we have already, in terms of whether they think a boycott would work. And I think it's more, they're actually quite supportive of the men's team. They would like their men to be able to support them in some way. Now, that's obviously very complex, very difficult for them. But I think rather than see them punished, I guess, for, something that's beyond, the men's players' control, I think they would more like to see them offering some form of support in any way that they can. I think the other thing too to think about with boycotts, and it's very difficult to know what effect it would have in terms of how much cricket means in Afghanistan in a political sense. I think, we've heard stories of it really, galvanizing the public and, inspiring the public. And, that's how, many players that we do see today actually came into the game, was they were inspired by their team. But in terms of whether it would have an actual effect on changing anything for those women, that's incredibly difficult to quantify. And I think that brings us to really hearing in the women's own words what they think about the situation. And so we caught up again with Firooza Amiri. You'll remember we brought you her story from last year about getting out of Afghanistan, and we caught up with her again about 6 months later to hear how she's going in Australia, living and thriving and making the most of the opportunities that she now has, particularly in sport and particularly in cricket, but not necessarily on the field. Let's have a listen.
Firooza, we're so happy to welcome you back onto ESPN Cricinfo Power Play. It's been about 6 months since we first spoke to you in May, and that was when you told us about your journey from Afghanistan to Australia 3 years ago and kind of how you're settling into your new life. But I know a lot has happened in the 6 months since then. We're now talking in November, and we understand that you are about to complete a diploma in sport and business. You've got a lot going on. Can you tell us a little bit about what the last few months have been like?
Hi, Firdose. Thanks for having me here. So excited to be back after 6 months. Yeah, as you said, there's lots of things been happening during these 6 months. Tomorrow is going to be my last day of class. I've finished a diploma in sport and business with Cedar Group in partnership with Cricket Australia, which been an incredible journey for me. To be in this, finished a year diploma in Australia. I did an 8-week or 12-week internship at Cricket Australia as well, part of my studying. And yeah, it's been finishing studying and then working aside as well. It's been busy year for me, but lots of things happened and lots of learning as well.
Firooza, can you tell us a little bit about that internship with Cricket Australia, how that came about and what it involved?
I could say it was a very short time, but it was very impactful and meaningful to me as well. I've seen, as I always say, sport builds connection and bridge. So while I was in there, I've seen so many inspiring individual people over there that I learned so many things from them, as well as I was in an environment where I could feel safe. I could feel empowered and equal, which is what we never had in Afghanistan. Being in an environment where you're feeling very equal with other people over there, that was absolutely remarkable to me.
Such beautiful words, Firooza. I mean, you're using words like safe, empowered, equal, basic human rights, I guess, that so many of us, and me sitting here in democratic South Africa, is, the kind of rights that we enjoy. And yeah, we really, it really hits home when you say that and you explain to us, what it means for you to experience that. Can we ask you just a little kind of more nitty gritty, what were you actually doing at Cricket Australia? I mean, are you in line to be the next CEO, or is it something, very exciting for you?
Yeah, I could say one day maybe I would not go for Cricket Australia CEO, but I will definitely go for ICC CEO, which is I could change something. But yeah, during my time in there, I was working alongside with our Cricket Australia National Volunteer Manager. So what I was doing is I was working on data analysis while I was there, and there's some changes that we are doing from play cricket to my cricket to play cricket, and I was checking all the data, working into websites with all the right brandings and everything as well. Yeah,
Yeah, it sounds so busy and so fantastic, and just, a wonderful experience. Since we last spoke, we know that the Afghan players in exile had asked to be recognised as a refugee team, and that sort of hasn't quite taken off. But we understand many of you are playing in leagues in Australia, including in the Premier League. How's your cricketing journey continued, given that you've been so busy off the field?
But yeah, that's true. But I could say not for me this year, but it was absolutely a great year for my teammates that I've seen them. So many of us moved from local club to Premier club, which I moved it, like I was playing last year in Premier as well. But I could say some of a young player, they moved from local to Premier, which is very exciting to see how we are improving, and like all of us around like Canberra and Melbourne, obviously. But for me, I was going a little bit of this time through a bit of self-care, that I was a bit sick this year. I could not go through like playing cricket like what they call consistently, because I was off the field. I was doing so much, and there was like a bit family pressure of like family works, because that was overseas for a bit of times, and I was taking the lead of all the family as well. So I did not play cricket this season, but I saw my friends that they were playing, and they improved so much. But I will play for the XI match as well. Like I will be in there, so which is good.
Yeah, Firooza, I want to ask you about that match. So this is a pretty big story. Cricket Australia are getting an Afghan 11 to play against Cricket Without Borders on the opening day of the Women's Ashes Test, which is obviously really massive. And I think it would be correct to say the first time that the Afghan girls are going to come together and play an actual competitive game. So this must be hugely exciting for you. Can you tell us a bit about it, about the girls you'll be playing with even, and what are you looking forward to? Do you see this as a breakthrough, like finally we can play a match?
I think it's not only a match for us, it's a huge step. Like it's gonna be a very big step that we are taking toward our journey of cricket. Because as you know, that as you are aware of, that ICC is ignored us as a refugee team, and also as a Afghanistan national team that represent Afghanistan, and obviously Afghanistan Cricket Board ignore us as well. But it's Cricket Australia took a huge step for us.
Yeah, so I guess it's hard to say at the moment, but what do you think the future could be for Afghanistan women's cricket? What are your hopes from this point onwards?
So from here, it doesn't matter if we are Afghan XI or Afghan 11 or Afghanistan refugee team or any team. Our hope is only represent Afghanistan in some ways, that be on the ground, represent Afghanistan, and women outside and inside Afghanistan look at us as a representative of Afghanistan. So what we are hoping here from here to continue playing for Afghanistan under Afghan 11 team. And we just want world help us with this journey. I know this is not going to be easy for all of us. It's going to be lots of challenges facing as well. But what we hope is, at the moment, we are working with our volunteers that take us to Australia. We are working on a contingency plan. So what we are looking is playing for Afghanistan as long as we have somebody who's supporting us in funding part as well. So we're hoping to continue play for Afghanistan.
Firooza, I have to ask you at this point, I mean, we've said the team is called the Afghan 11, and I'm sure you will have your flag and a kit that represents the country that you're from. But, when you're playing Cricket Without Borders, so you're not really playing another national or international side. Yes. So can you realistically see a space where Afghanistan, the girls, the women, play as Afghanistan against another national side? Or, is it something where you just want to create awareness, you just want to be role models, you want to inspire? Or is there still that part of you that thinks, we want to play in qualification for a World Cup, or we want to play in a bilateral series?
Yeah. So for us, I'm not sure if we're going to have the flag because, it's not Afghanistan national cricket team. Unfortunately, I'm sorry when I'm saying this word. It's something from my heart that
Sure.
so bad when I say, but we are not Afghanistan national team, so we won't have Afghanistan logo or Afghanistan flag. But what we're looking for, this is at the moment, but as you said, Without Borders, which is not a national team, and we are playing like a club, like a team, not a national team. So what we're looking from here, that at least ICC see our talents, see our hard work, see that passion that we have for cricket, that we are not in Afghanistan, we are in another country. We are playing for Afghanistan. We are hoping to play for Afghanistan. So from here, we just want the world see our talents, and especially ICC see our talent and accept us as a team, as a refugee team. At least if they're not accepting as accept us as a refugee team, that we can play with other countries. So when you are a refugee team, you could play with other country and the refugee team. But yeah, so we are just hoping for a better result of this game.
So whilst the Afghanistan men are still playing, and Champions Trophy, obviously, they're winning a lot. They recently beat some good opposition in South Africa and Bangladesh. How impressed have you been by their performances, and what are your thoughts on, how the men's team are going?
Well, I'm very, very happy for them. So Afghanistan men's team came a very long journey as well. It's never been easy for all of us. It's we all came through one journey, and obviously because they are men, they had more opportunity than us, as we are women's. But they came long way. They are achieving what our previous player and last generation were hoping for. And I'm so happy that I can see this new generation of Afghan men they are playing really good, and they are achieving so much for Afghanistan. This is what we want. We want to make a pride for Afghanistan. As a men and women's of national team, we all hoping for pride for Afghanistan. And I could say our goal is the same things. We want to represent Afghanistan. They want to represent Afghanistan. But ours is a bit more challenges, and we have more challenges, but we don't want to buy our the problems that we have and challenges that we have. We don't want to make another problem by keep stopping them or keep talking about stopping them from playing cricket. Now we have our ways. We want to play for Afghanistan and their Afghan 11 Afghan refugee team, or either Afghanistan national cricket team. We want to make a better future for Afghanistan women's inside Afghanistan or outside Afghanistan, and make a change in cricket. Obviously, if they come and support us, our power gonna be double power, and obviously our motivation, because we always look at them and they motivate us. When I was start playing cricket, obviously when I was younger, so if they come and support us, obviously our strength gonna be double. But as I said earlier, we all working through one goals that make Afghanistan pride and represent Afghanistan in the cricket ground.
Yeah, Firooza, you've spoken with such passion about your home country, and a lot of us know that we feel so close to the land of our birth, I guess, the place where we've come from. But since we last spoke to you, we've been very concerned with a worsening situation in Afghanistan for women. And, the latest laws even prevent women from hearing each other's voices, which is basically what we're doing now. And that wouldn't be allowed either. And it really seems like things are getting quite bad. When you look at what's happening in your home country, and you think of maybe people that you may know who are there or who have just managed to get out, how do you reflect on that? And how worried are you?
I think talking on that, it's a big shame for me. Obviously, in the world of today, that we can see equality is celebrated in the world. Women in Afghanistan, they don't have the basic rights. They don't have basic right of education, freedom of studying, going outside. Even they cannot step out of their house alone, or either with somebody. There is so many challenges of who is with you that you're going out with. I think this is a huge shame for me as well, if I say that animals have more freedom than women in Afghanistan. It's really sad to say that. And I never thought that one day Afghanistan gonna go back to 25 years ago and what my mom experienced, that I experienced it again. Because what she did, she refugeed to another country, and same to me now. Right now, I'm in another country, and I could see how Afghanistan stepped back to like 25 years ago, and what's happening in Afghanistan, it's absolutely, I could say, ridiculous. And also I would say that it's not, when we are talking that women in Afghanistan do not have freedom, it's not only about women in Afghanistan. It's like a world crisis. We all have to be think about it, that the next generation of Afghanistan is a generation that with no education, with no like no knowledge, nothing. They are getting married and they are making that cycle with no education. I think that we all have to think about it, that what's going to happen for that generation. And also I think I don't know why our young generation like me, most of them are silent about this matter. It's not a simple matter that I always say. I step up and I'm doing advocating for women's rights in Afghanistan and talking about women's rights in like social media as well. But it's not enough. We need a collective action that I don't know where is international communities, why they are not stepping up. I think it's not about women's right anymore. It's about surviving. Women in the world, they show how talented, how resilient they are. They've done so much, and they show the world that they have the ability of the men has, and they can change the world. I think at the moment is I can see my family, they are over there, they're living in Afghanistan. They're facing so many challenges. My aunt, she is in there. She's a young girl. She's always like, keep talking to her all the time. And I'm always, when she's talking to me, I start crying because she's at home all the time. She's not going out. She's not, she was a teacher in Afghanistan. She's not teaching anymore. You know, when you have I know how hard it is when you have a dream and you cannot achieve it. It happened to me that I can't play for Afghanistan. And same for her, that she cannot teach the girls because she was like girls teacher. And I can see all these things, and I can see the silence of the world. I think we all need to take a collective action toward this matter. And I think women in the world now have to have the equality and the power as men have. We are not going to fight. It's enough is enough. We have fight so much for our right in the world. And now most of the countries are celebrating women's equality. But Afghanistan is still in 25 years ago where men think that women cannot do anything. So poor minds always think like that. But yeah. It's very hard to say that, but I can. My graduation is on 18th of December, but I don't know how I'm meant to go to my graduation when 30 million of women in Afghanistan are not educated. How I'm meant to go and celebrate it?
Yeah, it's just so difficult to wrap, our heads around, given, our background. And thank you for putting it into perspective for us. What role do you think cricket can play in terms of, advocating and getting that message out and getting some support from the world, which is what you're asking for? Where does cricket fit in?
Well, as long that it's my personal opinion, as long we see somebody who is wearing hijab, because as you know, like Afghanistan is a Muslim country and most of our girls in Afghanistan are wearing hijab. Obviously now they're forced to wear it, but even by choice, there's so many people are wearing hijab in Afghanistan. So we are hoping that they can see us on the ground with our hijab, and they hope that still they can play at home. They can start playing cricket. Sport is always about it's always about I always play cricket because it makes me feel better. I enjoy it. When I'm on the ground, I always tell my mom that when I'm on the ground, I think I've achieved so many things. Even though if I do not play cricket good, it's still I think, okay, I'm on the ground, I'm doing what I like, I'm enjoying I have fun. And what we are thinking, what we are looking for, it's women in Afghanistan see us, and we give them that power and hope that we could make it to this stage and we could make it forward as long women in Afghanistan start even playing at their backyard. As what I did, I started playing cricket from my backyard. And in other way, we are hoping that this team could make a change of organizing some online classes for Afghanistan girls. We can't do for all Afghanistan. At least we can do in somewhere that it's possible. We started making some online classes for girls in Afghanistan that they could study inside Afghanistan, like online classes, and they can get out of Afghanistan through like scholarships and other opportunities. That's what I hope for, and that's what my plan is for next year. That I'm working through that for next year to make some opportunities for women to start studying, as many as possible.
Well, that was great to hear from Firooza again. And we can now bring you the second part of Firdose's interview with Benafsha Hashimi. Now, she is living in Australia, so we're going to bring you a little bit more on what she's up to, her thoughts on the Afghanistan men's team, and the women's upcoming match against Cricket Without Borders, which is happening this week. So let's have a listen to that interview.
So the one question is, have you been studying? And the second part is, are you still playing cricket?
First, in the first year, I haven't studied, honestly. When I came into here, I was like, because I was in year 11 while I was coming to here. So it was really difficult. I was wanting to have a certificate from year 12. But they said you're not allowed to do that because you're 18 and you're not eligible for the ESL, that means language stuff. And I had no English, so they were, in the one way they were right, and the other way they broke my heart because I was really good in study. I'm still good in study. And then after all, one of my friends told me, you have to study. Without study, you can't do anything. So I just started in 2023. And then I just finished my language skills, and I'm going to start Bachelor Sport Management in Psychology and Science in Canberra University. In 2025, it will be my first semester. And the other question you said, am I playing cricket? Of course, I am still playing cricket. I'm playing for two teams, Sydney Uni in Sydney and Canberra. I'm just playing Western Creek. So that is all.
Of course. And can I ask you about some of your teammates? I mean, you would have played together in the camps in Afghanistan. I know a lot of them are based in Melbourne. Is there a sense that you want to play together as a team? I've heard some calls for a refugee team to be recognized. We know the complications around Afghanistan recognizing you. How do you see things? Do you want to play as an Afghan team? Do you want to try and become a professional in Australia? Can you just talk me through that?
Of course, I want to play under my country name. That is my dream. That was the reason that I'm here. So of course I want to play under my country name. And yeah, we have tried many times and tried email and sending the letter to the ICC, but unfortunately all the time they're just ignoring us, which is quite upsetting. And anyway, can't say anything about that. So as you know, we are living in a different states, I know. But the thing is, we were living in a different state in Afghanistan too. It doesn't really make anything change. So I can still play and we can still catch up with crickets around. So it will be okay for us, honestly. It's not really big deal to do it. So I will definitely go for it.
Yeah, and there will be a match with an Afghan 11 playing against Cricket Without Borders, opening the Women's Ashes. When you look at that situation and you see that match, I mean, I don't know if you'll be participating or not. Is that the future, maybe for us to have more games like that where an Afghan 11 plays against some kind of representative team?
I wish so, because it is just like a starting step. So we said all the time, we're saying that we can't go by jumping. We have to put step by step that we don't clip out. So it's a good step, starting with the Cricket Without Border. I've been there and I was playing with Cricket Without Border 1 year in 2022, I think so. So it is a really good step to going and playing over there. And it will be, I think so, on 28, we have to go over there, and I'm just participating as well. So that will be really good experience, because it will be the first match that Afghanistan representing in MCG. They will play in MCG, which is a really big ground, and it's a kind of dream for everyone to play over there. So I'm so excited for it. Honestly, I don't have anything like it's a special. I can say it's a special feeling inside that I can't really explain it. How it's been to me. It's like a really big step for me.
Yeah, it's so lovely to hear you describe it that way. I want to ask you about the men's team. You mentioned that you really enjoy some of the players there. We have a lot of mixed emotion around the men's team, and also, of course, Australia don't play them in bilateral series. How do you feel about the Afghan men's team? They're having amazing success, semi-finals of the T20 World Cup. Do you enjoy watching them, or do you feel a bit sad?
Oh, why? I can say 50-50. On one way, I was happy because my team was being really played very good, and other thing was Afghanistan was knowing that they are going to semi-finals, which is quite best for us because we haven't been there. And the other thing, and other side, that was like I was just like hopeless. Why we don't have a women's team? It's a kind of being hopeless that we have a really great men team, but we never focus on a women team. And it is a bit difficult to talk about, honestly. So I was happy and I was sad too, because comparing to both, like having both as a national player, so we were trying to be a national player because we had some matches with the Zimbabwe and other teams. We were going to overseas, but unfortunately Taliban came in and everything get changed in one day. Anyway, it's a difficult feeling to describe, to say like men's having a more opportunity rather than girls.
Yes, I think you're expressing what a lot of us feel. It's a complicated situation with the men's team. Benafsha, before we let you go, I would like to ask you about just the situation for women in Afghanistan. I'm a woman myself. I'm a woman from a Muslim family, and I completely resonate with what you're saying about conservative culture and what people expect of us and how people label women. But, I've worked in cricket for almost 20 years, and I live in South Africa, and I have so many opportunities that I feel so privileged to have. And I also carry a lot of guilt that women in Afghanistan don't have that. So I'd like to ask you, we know that the Taliban have got worse. We know that restrictions have got worse. When you look at what's happening in your home country, how do you reflect on that?
Very sad, because everyone going to and celebrating 2025, and we are just going back to 90s. I think over the 90s, we're going really back. And like women's not allowed to study, they can't go to college and stuff. Like where will be doctor coming from? So if they're saying women's can't study, so who will do the stuff for women's? If they're not allowing a man touch the women, so what should be the future? I'm just like really hopeless in that point, that everyone going in future, but we are going backwards. There is no study. There is like crying for studying. I've been watching my friends who were crying because they are not allowed to go to universities, and I was feel really guilty because I couldn't help them, and I can't still help them because I'm really far. But I hope one day everything get changed and they get to the study back. And so if I were there, of course I would had dreams to go to university, to be a doctor or engineer or something different. So now the Taliban over there, they're not allowing them to complete their hopes and their dreams. So it's really annoying. And describing that situation is really difficult to me to describe it, because you can see whenever I'm trying to talk about that, I feel really emotional disturbed, because my country is going really bad with the women's. It's not fair with the women's.
Yeah, of course. And I feel exactly the same way as you do. Benafsha, before we let you go, just the last question from my side. This is a cricket conversation, and as two women talking, we understand that the issues are much bigger than cricket. And I would just like to ask, is it that you want cricket to be the change, or is this about something much bigger than that? And I understand that, of course, you want to play cricket, you want to represent Afghanistan, but you also want to study and build a life for yourself. How does cricket fit into the future?
I'm pretty sure until I didn't play IPL and WBBL, I won't leave the cricket. I will definitely focus on my studies as well. I've told you that I'm really good at studies. So I will continue my studying until I haven't played cricket in WBBL and WIPL. So without that, I'm not going to leave cricket. I will put hard work on myself and I will try my best to get there.
Phenomenal. Thank you for that. That's such a hopeful note to leave it on, Benafsha. You've got some lofty goals, not just a degree in your future, but hopefully some big leagues coming up as well. Thank you so much for joining us here on ESPN Cricinfo, for sharing your story with us, and for letting us in to a little piece of your world. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to talk and chat with you. It's really good to share your experience with the people. Because some people telling me that I grow over than my age. Sometimes I talk really professionally. If I had a grammar mistake, I'm sorry about that, because my English is still not good. It's still I'm working on it.
It's great.
No, it's still trying to fix it. So I hope you guys understood what I've said.
Listen, your English is absolutely perfect, and we also understand that it is your sixth language, which is phenomenal. So congratulations, Benafsha. Thank you so much.
That was great to hear the rest of that interview you did with Benafsha, Firdose.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that really comes out of the interviews we've done with both Firooza and Benafsha is just how much they want to play cricket and how much they want to be involved in the game. And that really brings me to the kind of what next, because this is, I suppose, the reason that we're having this conversation is to kind of think about if there are solutions. So one of the solutions that was proposed by the Afghan woman in exile was the idea of a refugee team. A very interesting idea, and something that is not unprecedented in sport, because of course we know that the Olympics have a refugee team. And I sort of looked into, is this a realistic possibility? What does it take to make a refugee team? And my sticking point around it is that with the Olympic refugee team, it's individual athletes from different nations, and they're not competing as a team, so to speak. They're competing as the refugee team, like Team South Africa would, but they're competing on their own kind of steam. And with cricket, I think it would be a little bit different. So the one question that I've had around this refugee team's formation is that if a refugee team was to form, A, where would it be based? Because Australia is certainly not the only country in the world that's home to refugees, and not the only cricketing country. The UK comes to mind as being home to many, many refugees, as does South Africa. And then B, who would be included in this refugee team? Well, of course, the Afghan women form a big percentage of the refugee population. There are refugees from all over the world living in these countries. And would you then have a combination team that perhaps had some Afghan refugees, Sri Lankan refugees, Pakistani refugees? We could go anywhere. Eritrean refugees, Lebanese refugees. And how would this team then look? What flag would it play under? Where would it be based? Who would govern it? Who would be the administrating body? These are really, really big and important questions. And sometimes I think when this debate is had, it sounds very simple to just say, let's have a refugee team. But I've just given you 4 or 5 questions around the practicalities of it. So Valkerie, when you look at the situation and you hear what I've said there, is it realistic? Should there be a refugee team? Or what is the what next?
So I think the what next is in terms of, I guess it's twofold. One is the ICC's role and what, if anything, they can do. And we spoke a little bit about that earlier in terms of them being member-led and therefore, you know, how they can do anything in terms of pressuring the Afghanistan Cricket Board to recognise the women's team once more. But also, too, if we're speaking about the women's team themselves, it's how can they play at what level, on what platform, what's going to be best for their development going forward. I mean, bear in mind, they've, you know, escaped their home country. I mean, that brings with it all levels of trauma. They've had to learn a new language. They've had to learn a new culture. They've had to settle in an entirely different place. So, I mean, you can understand if playing cricket at a particularly high level at the moment has had to go by the wayside. And so I think it's something that is going to have to be built up again. And, you know, those players that can and want to forge ahead with a cricket career continue to do so at a level that suits them, just basically so that, you know, they're not, you know, they're being set up to succeed at the level that they're able to compete at the moment. So that's a really interesting aspect in terms of how this will move forward. We've got that match coming up that we mentioned against the cricket, against Borders 11. So, I mean, that's, I guess, in a way, an exhibition, because it's putting on their story as much as anything, whilst also giving them a stage to compete at. And then from there, it's, I guess, up to them in terms of how they manage to progress with their careers.
I think that's an excellent point that you've raised, in that as much as we have the argument for wanting to come up with some sort of high-level elite structure, there are a lot of other things that are happening behind the scenes, much less the language issue, which I think was such an important one that you've raised. And we spoke to the women, you know, they mentioned that learning a new language is tough. And I must say, if I'd only had 3 or 4 years to become proficient in English, I don't think I would be at their level. I've taken my whole adult life to learn some Arabic and I'm still pretty poor at it. So I really do just take my hat off to their resilience and the things that they've been able to do. They've also got great people in their corner. They've got people who are really advocating for the cause, amplifying their voices, because ultimately that's part of activism. It's being able to tell the story. Sometimes we can't really do that much, you know, physically do that much, but we can say something. And I think Mel Jones, as we've mentioned, is one of the people who's done that. She's still doing it, and she certainly indicates that she's going to keep doing it. So she spoke to us a little bit about her hopes for the future, and let's have a listen to that now.
So, Mel, in terms of these women playing as a team now, what is it that you understand is the ICC's role in terms of recognising them? Where do things stand for them as a team?
Yeah, anything to do with these players as a team would be their own individual team. They won't play underneath the ACB or the Afghanistan flag as a side. But what we're trying to navigate at the moment is how can we allow them the opportunity of still feeling part of their country while not saying that they're the Afghanistan women's cricket team, because, you know, that you know, my understanding is that will never be the case. And that is really, really tough for them as a group to try and understand. I still don't think most of them have got their heads around that at the moment, and that just adds to the trauma and you know, things as well. But so at the moment, the match that's being set up through Cricket Australia, that will be on day one of the day-night test, Women's Ashes test next year against Cricket Without Borders, which is another fantastic cricketing community group. We're working through that now as in terms of the actual title of this team. But I think hopefully that, you know, they themselves know that they were the contracted players, the contracted Afghanistan women's players at the fall of Afghanistan, and they get an opportunity to once again, you know, play again for the first time really as that group.
Yeah, Mel, it's quite a confronting word, when you say things like, and I think we agree with you in our understanding of how teams get official international recognition, but it does look very unlikely that for as long as the current administration is in place in Afghanistan, that that woman will be able to do anything, much less play sport. So, in our conversations with players, it does seem like that reality is almost like drip feeding down, that maybe we won't play as Afghanistan, but we'll play, under different labels. And we know that the one proposal was as a refugee team, and we've looked at the Olympic example quite carefully. Of course, it's different because that's individuals, from various places. This would be a team from one territory. So have you thought about that a bit more, or is that on the back burner? I mean, of course, Australia is home to refugees from so many places, not just Afghanistan.
Yeah, no. I look, for us, and when I say us, I sort of mean the close-knit group that's sort of been in and around this playing group. First and foremost, always has been their health and well-being, and I mean that from a physical, emotional, mental health, that full gamut, and trying to give them their own voice and autonomy in this situation. Like, even, to be honest, like even me talking to you guys about this, I still feel, and I haven't spoken about it too much at all, I still feel a little bit, not nervous, but apprehensive, because it's not my story to tell. And I'm just a conduit to hopefully allow these women to tell their own story, and their own story in terms of all the players is so different too. There's so many different journeys to get here that that have been hard to tell. And I think the players will be at different stages in being able to get that out. So one of the ways in which we feel as if we could sort of explore a little bit more is in terms of having a refugee team. Pie in the sky stuff might be that it's a World Cup of refugee teams, and you can have an Afghanistan women's and men's cricket team, and they can trial from everywhere around the world, not just the players that are here in Australia. So that's probably a fair way down the track, and it's probably one that needs a lot of discussion and robust. But again, that's up to the players. Like, we can put forward so many different ideas, but at the end of the day, it's up to these women to decide on what they want their journey to look like. We can help, we can support, we can hopefully sort of manage a few things for them along the way. But yeah, so like I said, for us at the moment, it's education, it's health here, it's getting them into local cricket, it's getting them feeling comfortable within Australia and still feeling connected to the sport and not getting jaded by that. And there's some amazing women in this group that they inspire me daily. So it's fantastic to be around them. You just hope that you can be there in whatever way they need.
Well, given all the things that we're talking about, their education, what they've been through, finding a new home, that sort of thing, this is all huge picture stuff. So where do you see cricket's role being? And I, as you say, it's going to be sort of up to the players, but what can cricket do? Where do you see it fitting in this story?
Yeah, cricket can come in a variety of different ways, and they already have. Like I mentioned, the local clubs here in Melbourne and Canberra have been absolutely fantastic. We're devising at the moment a platform for donations to come in for the group, which we can then, allow them to choose where that money goes. But it will still be in and around their education, their health, and their cricketing journey. And if you look at some of these players, we've got a group of them who are in the CEDAR program at the moment, which is a sport education program, and they've been interning at Cricket Australia. So even just the conversations they've had with staffers in the office and an opportunity for people involved in cricket just to have a conversation with these women, which they've never had that opportunity before, kind of thing. And that just opens up so many more avenues and doors for them as well. But it opens up sort of a better understanding for us in Australia about Afghanistan, about women's empowerment and rights and all those sorts of things. So, I look at this group and I think that they're, how would I say this? I've been around. I've been on this for 52 years, and I've been on the steepest learning curve I think I've ever been on. Being attached to this group in such a fantastic way, challenging at times, frustrating at times, but also it just gives you just such a new, fresh look on life and the challenges in which we face daily, whether it's cricket or sport or life or what have you. And I think the more people can have those conversations with these women, I think the better people will be.
Yeah. I love what you say there, Mel, and I almost just want to end off with this, everything you've described is this multi-layered complexity, which is really why for us the story has taken such a long time to formulate, in that I don't think it's just the ICC's fault in terms of they're not letting Afghanistan women play. It's not just anybody's fault in that the team can't be recognized by their official governing body. There's laws in place, as you know, I'm in South Africa, we lived through the apartheid times, and it was easier then to ban apartheid South Africa. There were no World Cups. The commercial landscape was different. When you take all these things into account, I mean, do you see it as this big picture? Like, there's not really much, I guess, anybody can do to force Afghanistan to recognize a women's team, and so we've got to find other ways while also letting the men play. Or just how do you feel about that complexity?
Yeah, it is one of the most complex pieces I've ever seen. There's nothing black and white about this at all. Yet at the same time, there's moments where you go, well, hang on a minute, that is quite simple, but it's simple to me with my lens. Now, if I'm then someone completely different, sitting in a different country, I'm a different gender, I'm a different age group, I'm a CEO, or everyone's lens on this is it's such a wide range, and I think that's been part of the problem. I can easily sit here and say, well, it's a human rights issue. Done and dusted. It's gendered apartheid happening in the country, and that should just make it really, really easy for everyone. But then when I sit in another country with a different hat on, I'll be like, well, yes, I see that, but that, we can't do that because of A, B, and C. So I do think there's a question around leadership. People take on positions of leadership to lead. And it's not to say that you have to make a black and white decision about things, but I think you have to stand up and be a voice of and lean into some tough situations. And this is a really tough situation. I think the frustration has been the lack of conversation around it. And so here's this amazing group of women who are trying to rebuild their lives and still connect to cricket. And they've hardly had a conversation with our leaders right across the world. And I think that's been the most frustrating thing for me. We might still get to the same point and decisions that we are now, regardless of those conversations, but give these women their due. Give them space. And so, kudos to Cricket Australia. I was on the board when all this happened. The board were phenomenal in supporting me in this process. And now they've got to the point where Nick Hockley, the CEO, he's had multiple meetings with them. Jodie Newton has as well. And that in itself, just the ability to sit down and listen, has made such a difference to this group. And that's probably the one piece that I would say we've been really bad at over the last 4 years, coming up to 4 years now, is that people turn their back on that conversation. And I would hope that if we learn anything from this, is that if something like this happens again, whether it's different country or a different group of people, if it's a men's team somewhere or something like that, that we don't turn our back on people and hope that silence will make it go away, because it just doesn't. No.
So, Mel, looking ahead, I mean, there's a lot of work being done. How do you see the future for these women, for this team, and your involvement with them?
Yeah, I really don't know, and I've probably said that right throughout the journey as well, because things have changed so much and very, very quickly. We've got a short turnaround of news cycles, don't we? So when it all first sort of happened, you're sort of thinking, well, the world will get behind them and support them, and then all of a sudden Russia-Ukraine happened, and then something else, and then all of a sudden they were almost yesterday's news in a way, isn't it? So I think for me, it's just being able to be there for them in whatever way, shape or form. So I think, this match coming up in Jan is a nice way just to keep the conversation piece going, so that when people are brave enough to step in and go, oh, okay, I would like to be able to do something here, that we're ready to say, you're more than welcome, and you come in whatever shape or form. So I look at these players. I hope they keep just loving playing the game of cricket. I think they will. I don't think that we're going to lose them to the game of cricket. I would love to be able to see them touring as a group and going through cricket training program year after year, so that they can actually find out what their best skills are. So at the moment, they're just sort of in limbo at the moment. Whereas every other nation that's got a women's team, they've got resources and funding and coaches around them so that these players can be their very best. Well, these girls don't know what their very best is at the moment. And I'd love them to be able to have the opportunity of really diving into that as much as they possibly can.
Yes, Mel Jones, very much looking forward to what the future holds for these women. And I guess that starts very shortly with the match they're about to play at Junction Oval against Cricket Without Borders. I guess that's just a starting point, and it's a one-off match. And then beyond that, we don't know what's going to happen. I guess it's a little hard when, there's just like a one-off opportunity, to play cricket and also, for them to get their message out. But I guess they're not the only ones that are faced with, sporadic chances to play. And, we've brought you the reasons why, but it can't be easy, Firdose.
No, not at all. And as you say, it's not that the Afghanistan women's team are the only team that don't play often. Of course, they are the main topic of conversation and really what we've tried to bring the spotlight on. But I spend a lot of time, perhaps not as much as I'd like to, because there's just so much cricket these days, but covering Zimbabwean cricket. And I covered their return to Test cricket in 2011. They were on a 6-year self-imposed exile from the longest format at that stage because things were really bad in the country. They're now not part of the World Test Championship. They've in fact just hosted Afghanistan over the festive period where they played their first Boxing Day and New Year's tests in Bulawayo. And they were really entertaining games. I kept an eye on them as well. And I've been talking to Zimbabwe about what it feels like to be on the outside. And it's painful, to be honest with you. It really seems as though Zimbabwe, who are full members just like Afghanistan, just like Australia, just like South Africa, just like India, don't get a lot of fixtures. And in fact, they didn't play against England for a very long period of time. I think it would have been from 2003, that World Cup where there was the protest against the death of democracy in Zimbabwe and the England players didn't go to their game. They will now play them in a test match in the UK in May 2025. But such a huge gap between fixtures means that Zimbabwe face the possibility of becoming irrelevant. They don't really qualify for World Cups, which is, of course, their own fault, and several other factors. But they don't get to play regular test fixtures because they're not part of the World Test Championship table. And so they're just not getting games. And the sentiment you get from them is that we're also a full member. And yet the other full members are happy to see us not take full part in competition. And that's not right. And I really feel for Zimbabwe. It's a country with huge passion, just like a lot of these cricketing countries, just like what we hear coming out of Afghanistan. It's a country with excellent talent potential. The schooling system in Zimbabwe is fantastic. And they really do produce players. The women's team are doing well as well, which is another thing that's worth mentioning here. And they're just feeling very much on the out. And that's the reason, in fact, that Zimbabwe are so keen to play Afghanistan, because they recognize that it's not nice when you're left out of the club that you're supposed to be part of. So they have actually extended the hand of inclusion to Afghanistan, despite the calls from the outside world not to play them. So have South Africa. They played a bilateral series against Afghanistan in Sharjah last year, and there were huge protests. Lawyers for human rights were up in arms. Subsequently, of course, the sports minister, who I've mentioned, has called for boycotts. Valkerie, the two countries you cover the most, England and Australia, both of them don't want to play Afghanistan bilaterally. This is like very weird, because it's kind of like, oh, we'll play them in World Cups, but we won't play them bilaterally. And to me, that speaks of it's moralizing, and, it's saying you have principles, but you only have them some of the time. And I have a little bit of an issue with that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really big sticking point. It's sort of, if you're going to have the courage of your convictions to, not play bilaterals, then, what are you going to do when there are World Cup points on the table or Champions Trophy points on the table, that sort of thing. So it does put them in a sticky spot. I guess the reasons that they give, and I mean, whether you buy into them or not, is that the bilateral series are down to being staged by the home boards, whereas those tournament competitions are run by the ICC. So there's sort of a requirement as a member to, or pressure as a member to play in those. But, you know, it brings us back to discussion, which has been pretty hot as a topic of late. I mean, we've had politicians in the UK writing to the ECB saying you shouldn't play Afghanistan in the Champions Trophy. We've had the UK Prime Minister coming out and saying the ICC need to show leadership on this. That's been echoed by the ECB, calling on the ICC to show some leadership on this issue. But as we've discussed in this podcast, I mean, they're saying their hands are tied because Afghanistan is a member and, you know, they have to, you know, go by what all of their members want. And so if this is put to a vote and if there's only a couple of countries that are not wanting to play against Afghanistan, then they're lacking support in that. I think what this story brings out for me is it's only somewhat about cricket. It's a lot more about the message. And that struck me a little bit when during the Ashes, it was the first Ashes one-day international, and Heather Knight, the England captain, was asked about her thoughts on what's happening with the Afghanistan women's team. And she said that she was very keen to meet some of these women whilst the England team are in Melbourne playing the Ashes. And certainly she alluded to this match that we've got this week with the Afghanistan women playing Cricket Without Borders, and saying she wanted the fact that that match was going on broadcast far and wide to give these women a voice. So it's giving that platform. So as cricket has given these women, you know, in some ways a means of escape from what was going on in their country, it's given them a means to start a new life, and it's given them opportunities that, you know, I know, you know, from hearing their stories, they very much appreciate. But it's also giving them an opportunity to keep what's going on with women and girls in Afghanistan at the forefront of people's minds. Because Heather Knight sort of mentioned that until this debate had sparked up again with the calls around the Champions Trophy and boycotts there, she feared that these women had been largely forgotten. We hadn't forgotten them. We were just working very hard on collating their stories and getting in touch with them and bringing it to you. So we hope we've played a very small part in helping to give these women a voice, and we look very much forward to what the future holds for them, whether that be in cricket management, in coaching, in commentary, in playing, and just in terms of whether these women as a team can play, where their development goes from here. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of consciousness around them being able to develop their game at a pace that, you know, is okay for them given what they've been through. So I have no doubt that there is a lot more to come with this story, and we are going to keep on top of it and keep in touch and hopefully bring you some good news in the future as to how things are going. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us on ESPN Cricinfo Power Play.